Have you ever met someone and within days it felt like you'd known them your whole life? I have. It was like the connection was instant, intense. Maybe it was just a little too perfect. They're talking about trips, a future with each other, building something real. And before you know it, you're emotionally invested. But then something shifts. The energy changes, the consistency fades. And now you're left trying to figure out, was any of that junk real? Well, guess what? Today, we're going to talk about limerence and future faking. Okay? Today's topic, emotional highs and empty promises. It's going to be a tough one. Let's get into it. Hey, y'all, this is Mike Walker, and we about to get into something real deep today, and it's called emotional highs and empty promises. We've been through it all, though. Meet somebody new, they promise you the world. We fall for it. Hook, line, and sinker, and we get the feeling like this poor fella right here. So, without further ado, we're gonna get into this, though. We're gonna break it down bit by bit. First, first and foremost, we're going to talk about the word limerence. We are going to talk about limerence. We have dealt with limerence before. I have, you have. We maybe didn't know what it was called at the time, though. But as always, you learn something new every day. Now, limerence is not love. We're going to make that perfectly clear. Limerence is not love. Limerence is that intense emotional obsession with someone. It is it's an intrusive thoughts, constant replaying of conversations, reading into every text, every look, every delay. You meet somebody or you get to conversing with someone that you always had a thing for, and you just can't let that simple exchange go. How are you doing? Or they compliment on your clothing. And you just can't let it go. You just chewing on it. But you're not just interested in them. You are mentally consumed by them. And here's the key. You're often more attached to how they make you feel than who they actually are. I'm going to say this one more again. You're often attached to how they make you feel than who they actually are. Okay, that's limerence. Now, gonna play this video clip. I have a video clip for everything. So just sit back and take a listen.
Word of the day is limerence. It's a noun, and it means the state of being infatuated or obsessed with another person. Used in a sentence, it sounds like her heart raced with limerence every time his name lit up her phone screen, a feeling both intoxicating and exhausting. Another example would be, in the throes of limerence, he replayed their brief conversation 100 times, searching for hidden meaning in her every word. Another example, when limerence fades, you begin to see the person as they truly are, not as you imagined them to be. Limerence. You're welcome.
Okay, I hope y'all caught that right there. I hope y'all caught what Ellen the Great had to say about that. So, Limerence thrives in uncertainty, not fully knowing where you stand. That's a hot and cold dynamic. Okay. That's not confusion. That is fuel. Now we're gonna move on to the next part of this crazy emotional recipe. Okay. Let me get rid of that. Next, we're gonna talk about future faking. Okay. Now, maybe you've heard of future faking, at least the term. Maybe you've heard of the term future faking. Maybe you have not. I know I haven't, but guess what? We have dealt with it. And to be honest with you, if we are honest with ourselves, we may have participated in it. We have made done some future faking on our own. So let me break this down. Um, Future faking is when someone paints a picture of a future with you, not because they plan to build it, but for example, we should take a trip together, or I could see us building something serious. You're different. I never felt like this before. I know y'all heard this stuff before. I've had it, and guess what? I've used those lines. But here's the problem. The words are moving fast, but the actions, they are barely tipping. You know, future faking is not about connection. It is about control. And I got a video. I got several videos on this and been a little, don't know which ones I want to put up though, but let's play this one. Well, let me get rid of the future faking. Let's play this one first right here. Here we go. Sit back and listen.
Future faking. Future faking is a manipulation tactic where someone makes elaborate promises about the future they never intend to keep. They paint vivid pictures of trips you'll take together, dreams you'll build, goals you'll achieve as a team. At first, it feels like hope. They talk about moving in together, getting married, starting that business, finally going on that vacation you've always wanted. The promises are specific enough to feel real. They might even plan details, look at houses online, or talk about baby names. Your brain latches onto these promises because they feel like commitment. You start organizing your life around a future they've described. You turn down opportunities, stay in situations that hurt you, or excuse bad behavior because you're investing in what's coming. But the future never arrives. When you bring up the promises, they get vague. The timeline shifts. Suddenly it's not the right time, or circumstances changed, or you're being too pushy. The goalposts move, but the promises keep coming. New ones replace the old ones, each just as detailed, just as convincing. This keeps you hoping, waiting, stuck in a cycle of disappointment masked as patience. Future faking works because humans are wired to trust patterns and words. When someone describes a future with you, your brain begins treating it as real. You make sacrifices for something that only ever existed in conversation. The promises aren't plans. They're tools to keep you compliant, distracted, and emotionally invested while they get what they need right now.
Mm, that's a mess right there, y'all. That's a mess right there. So, and again, future faking is not about connection. It is about control. Ooh, that's a hot mess right there, folks. Now, we combine that. People, limerence, and future faking can go hand to hand. And that is a dangerous combination, not a bad combination, unhealthy. It just flat out dangerous. Okay, we're gonna break this down a little bit now. Now, limerence plus future faking is an emotional trap. Okay, because you're already in a limerence state. You're already head over heels about them. You want to believe what they're saying. You're not just hearing their words, you're actually, and listen to me good when I say this, you're actually building a life around them in your mind. You fantasizing, they selling you a bill of goods and you already seeing, visualizing you and that person on a trip with each other. Baby names, like the video said, a whole bunch of malarkey. You already visualizing that though. You just eating it up. They got you eating out the, palm of their hands though. So when they say, I see a future with you, you don't question it. You expand on it. I'm guilty as charged, both ends. I fell for it and I've used that line several times. But now you're attached, not to the person, but to the story you've created. They fed you the bill of goods. Now have you made up the story? And it's not good. It is not good at all. So you got to be mindful. Now, here we go with this. The signs that you're in it. Basically, the signs that you fell for it. And again, hook, line, and sinker. Now, you might be caught in limerence and future faking if you think about them constantly. Now, that might seem simple enough. You could be in a legit relationship and you're thinking about them all the time, though. So that can be a bit iffy right there if you think about them constantly. But, well, put it to you this way, how much is too much? Okay? You're holding on unto things they said more than than they actually done. And I'm going to repeat this one more again. You're holding on unto things they've said more than what they've done. In other words, actions speak louder than words. And I love this, you're ignoring the red flags because it felt real. Show of hands. I mean, us fell for that. You see all the red flags. Forget the yellow flags, the red flags, and you just they glaring a crimson red, bright red. But you ignored it. Why? Because it felt so real. And guess what? We all fell for it. I know some people falling for it right now. I just want to grab them by the arm and just shake them though. Well, next point of next sign of that you're into it real bad is that you feel anxious when they pull away, but euphoric when they return. You feel anxious when they pull away, but euphoric when they return. Now, right there, that is serious, serious, serious obsession and definitely codependency. That is dangerous. That is extremely dangerous, though, that you basing your emotional highs and lows off the actions or inactions of one person. That's not good. Certainly not healthy. Wow. And another sign is that you're more invested in their potential than their patterns. And let me repeat this. You are more invested in their potential than their patterns. In other words, you're not going on what they do. You're not paying attention or you're just simply ignoring their actions. You're just very much focusing on the the load of bull they just gave you. They just looking at, wow, this person has the potential to make me happy. This person has the potential to give me that life that I've been so desperately seeking in a relationship. You're looking at the potential, which in itself is non-existent. They just feeding you a bunch of BS though. You're more invested in their potential than their patterns. Now, let me put this out here. Consistency is not confusing. I'm going to repeat this one more time. Consistency is not confusing. If you are confused in this relationship, situationship, whatever you want to call it, if you are confused, it is because the actions don't match their words. It's just that plain and simple. It is just that plain and simple. Now, a lot of people don't like hearing this part, but it's necessary. Sometimes we participate in our own heartbreak. Sad as that sound, and it's not because we're foolish. Well, between you and I know some people who are foolish, but don't tell them I said that. But it's not because we're foolish, but because we're hopeful. Ooh, we want the connection to be real. We want the future they describe. So we overlook their delays, their inconsistency. We excuse their bad behavior. And as a result, we sit down and we wait. And for someone to become who they say they would be, we wait for them to become someone who they said they would be. But listen, we've been saying this for years. You have to learn how to date reality, not potential. Let me say, because in plenty of singles groups, and especially in the one that I run, SBC and SBCC, one of the biggest questions or complaints I hear, and especially from women, and rightfully so, is I date reality. Do not date potential. And that is the truth right there. That is definitely the truth. So here's the point right here. How do we avoid that? How do we break the cycle? We're glad y'all ask good questions though. Y'all ask good questions. How do you protect yourself? First, you watch behavior over the words. Of course, like I said a few minutes ago, action speaks louder than words. Anybody can talk a good game. Anybody can talk about the future. But guess what? Very few can build one. That might sound bleak and dark, but it's the truth. Second step, possible step, is slow down emotionally. Whew. I can't count the number of times I fell victim to limerence and fake future faking because I was in sixth gear emotionally. Like, oh, I'm happy I met the right one. I met the right one. But just because it feels intense, it doesn't mean it's healthy. Remember that. If it feels intense, doesn't necessarily mean it is healthy. Next, check your attachment. Check your attachment. Ask yourself, do I actually know this person or just how they make me feel? Let me repeat this. Do I actually know this person or just how they make me feel? And here's another one. Set your boundaries early. Set your boundaries early. If someone is making big promises early on, I mean, that alone should be a red flag right there. But I shall continue though. If someone is making big promises early on, it's okay to say, well, let's focus on getting to know each other first. Now, that sounds simple, right? That I say it this way. That sounds common sense right there. That's common sense right there. But, we don't do that. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty. Ask yourself this: what's the big rush? What is the big rush? If they promise you a whole bunch early on, again, what's the angle? What's the game? Why they doing this so soon? So, you know, so, how many of y'all been caught up in a situation where everything felt right, but nothing was actually consistent? What is something someone promised you that they never delivered on? And the real question is, at what point do words stop mattering without action? And I'm going to repeat that again. At what point do words stop mattering without action? Well, bottom line is this. You weren't crazy. You know what? Let me say this. We weren't crazy. We weren't too much. We were responding to what was presented to us. But going forward, we have to learn to not fall in love with possibility. We need to learn how to fall in love with patterns, because real love doesn't confuse us. And it definitely doesn't disappear after making promises. Let me say that again, because real love doesn't confuse, and it doesn't disappear after making promises. This has been your head chef, Mr. Mike Walker. And remember, if they can imagine a future with you, they should be able to show up in the present. Until next time, take care, be safe out there, and don't take any wooden nickels. Be blessed.